Good afternoon. This is the In My Opinion show. I am Henry Hatter, your host. Today I have a very distinguished guest with us. We're going to talk about Flint City water and other issues dealing with the deliberation system, distribution system. I have Jeff Wright, the Drain Commission. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
We'll get right into the issues of the day. I'd like to ask you an academic question. The water throughout the United States and no less also applicable to Flint City water. Is it good water? Is it bad water? Should we be concerned about our water in the United States?
In a general sense, no, Henry. Municipal water particularly. The municipal water systems across the country and in this state, whether it's in Pontiac, Lansing, Flint, Detroit, all have a very stringent testing requirement that comes down from the EPA and the DEQ, and it requires that municipal water supplies have to be tested every day. And if there's anything found beyond the norm, the people have to be notified.
That means that the water meets a certain EPA standard or DNR standard or
Yes,
local
sir.
standard, right?
Yes, sir.
Anytime you exceed that standard, you must report immediately, without delay,
Yes, sir.
to the authorities, that
Yes,
being
sir.
the legal authorities.
Yes. And that's why I believe that municipal systems are the safest form. Even when they do have their troubles, they require you to notify the people. I brought with me today to show you some examples of bottled water. Bottled water requires no testing. There's no federal oversight. Many of the bottled water companies that you see, and your audience can look this up for themselves at the Natural Resources Defense Council. They have a total listing of all the bottled water that they test and the contaminants and bacteria and other items that are in it. So bottled water does not require testing, and even if they do test it and they find something wrong, they're not required to notify the people. The same with private wells.
There are no federal standards on
There are
bottled
no
water.
federal standards.
No local standards.
No local
No
standards.
state standards.
No state standards.
You're on your own.
You're on your own. Municipal water systems are the only systems that have standards, require testing every day, and if there is something wrong, they have to notify the people immediately.
Without delay. And they also must submit a compliance report and a time period that you will reestablish a compliance if you exceed those standards, right?
Yes.
So there's a mechanism through EPA, the DNR, the Drinking Water Division of the DNR, and local standards that people do get engaged, and they attack the problem immediately without delay.
Yes.
And they advise people what to do if there is a non-compliance. What do they advise people to do if there's a non-compliance?
Well, it depends on what the non-compliance is related to. For instance, the last several years that we were on the Detroit water system, Detroit required us to boil our water 17 different times over a few year period. And that was totally related to bacteria. So even though you may have bacteria that came from the Detroit system, boiling it simply destroyed that bacteria, made it safe. There are other non-compliant issues that deal with chemicals. Boiling water doesn't reduce the chemical in that water, as you well know. So depending on the amount that's in this, the amount that's been exceeded, it might require that this verbiage that older people, younger people, and people with deficient immune systems don't drink the water or seek advice from their physician. And then there's multiple different things that are tested for that could have different results or different actions if they were to find them. In Flint's case, even though the county has no jurisdiction over Flint, they're their own entity, it was they exceeded the level of THMs at the treatment plant, and you could probably explain that better than I, what that is a result of, the chlorine, the organics, etc. And that happened in August of last year. It's my understanding that all the testing since has came back within the EPA standards.
I just wonder if our audience is listening to what you just said, because you had a non-compliance back in August. We had exceeded the limits on THM, right?
Yes. The
Uh,
limit is set
trihalo
by the EPA, 80
methane,
parts
yeah.
per billion.
80 parts per billion. And that's a very, very small amount,
It is.
of which they really have not done all of the testing to see how that impacts us and at what levels. What is the threshold that we can endure without causing the ratio of the number of people in parts per thousands, or parts per millions in people. If you have one death out of 100,000 deaths, that's too many. I think, I believe.
Or
that there's
illness.
something-
And,
yeah,
you
or
know,
illnesses
the
and
people
so forth.
received a notice
Yeah.
that is required by the
Yeah.
EPA
Yeah.
anytime you exceed
Yeah.
a limit. And that should make anybody concerned. It would make me concerned. But it is important to note that that testing goes all the way back to August.
And I'd like to have the audience understand that there are three schools of contaminants that we need to be concerned about. One is the metals, the heavy metals, like nickel, chromium, cadmium, and other types of lead and mercury and so on and so forth. Those are detrimental. So the water pure drinking regulations require the purveyor to remove these to the point where they are at so many parts per million. Is it 0.0005 parts per million or per billion?
Per billion.
Per billion.
Very,
Okay.
very, very small.
Then you have the other constituents, which are the constituents from paints and solvents, which are and insecticides,
Mhm.
very detrimental. They must be removed. And finally, you have domestic waste, like from sewage plants and from domestic restrooms. that
Well,
might
domestic,
intrude.
in the case of any
And-
river
yeah.
system, domestic and wild animal,
Yeah.
geese,
Yeah.
ducks, deer, dogs.
And this is where you get the fecal coliform.
Yes, sir.
And if I could kind of explain to the public here, there are two ways that the conveyance system, the water system, can be a problem. One is if the pressure inside the pipe is higher than the pressure outside, you don't get seeping of water from the outside. You get the loss of water, which causes your water bill to rise a little bit.
Yes.
But if the water pressure is higher on the outside of the pipe, you're going to get the intrusion of domestic waste or farm waste.
Right, it's a negative
And you
pressure.
get this fecal coliform element into the water, which is very detrimental, and that provides the kind of bacteria and
And that's why they use
yeah.
chlorine.
Yeah, and that's
to-
why
to
the
treat
chlorine,
the water.
if you can imagine this, you want to get rid of things that are detrimental to health. There's nothing probably more detrimental than bacteria.
For many different,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
many different aspects.
So that's
Whether
why
it's
you
stomach ailments,
yeah.
many skin rashes, etc.
that's why it's so important for you to remove all of those diseases causing constituents.
Mhm.
So I'd like to move on real quickly. Give us a little bit of background about you. What gives you the prerogative to sit here at this table and discuss this issue?
Well, you were kind enough to ask me.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
I would never dare to say that I have the background that you have. You have a very illustrious background in this industry, and I've probably not learned what you've forgotten, to be honest about it. But I started at the Drain Commissioner's office in 1974 as a laborer, and I've pretty much held every position in that office since 1974, and then I ran for Drain Commissioner when the late Tony Ragnon passed away in 2000, and I was fortunate enough to be put in by the people. So I started in 74 as a laborer, and I've been the Drain Commissioner since 2001. My educational background, I went to school locally, went to the Genesee Area Skills Center as a secondary type education, and I went to Ferris And at Ferris, I took up occupational safety and health, which was a new arena at that time in the early 70s that dealt with industrial safety
And hygiene.
and hygiene. And that's kind of where I got the interest in the water and wastewater and drainage industry.
Well, and working in it all of these years, you learn a lot.
I have to say I've learned more on the job than I did in the classroom.
Well, if you don't, people will pick you apart, and so will the press. So you have to be good at what you do.
So this will be my 41st year.
I'd like to just move on and ask you things that are tantamount on people's mind. There are two problems out there that people are facing, and they're trying to resolve these in their own minds or aspirations. And one, oh, by the way, shall we have a drink from the
Cheers.
water system?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mm.
Did you taste any chlorine?
In all municipal systems, you're going to get some chlorine residual taste, but yes, I do, to answer your question.
Well, I can taste just a little bit because I don't drink normally municipal water. I drink well water. So I did like you did. I tasted a little bit of it. But the water was good.
Yes, it was.
That's what I drink all my life. And so I have no difficulty.
We were both brought up on
Do I have any reservations about the water? No. Because I know that the water system in the United States is the best in the world. I know it's like a doctor having to diagnose diseases from blood, and people drink that water, and the doctor's taking a look at what's in your water, right? When he diagnoses a person's blood, right?
Yes.
And here, I'd like to ask you, if people say they've had various types of rashes and feeling sick and nausea and so on and so forth, do you have an incident rate for that? And if so, what are hospitals telling us? Now, they got to be a pretty big part of this component. Colleges and universities, and we have 5 of them in this city.
Five great universities.
And they have all of the wherewithal to test our water and say, Jeff, you need to do something with that water. But nobody's ever come up to you, and I better ask you, has anybody ever said that they really had a problem? Have you had any incidents, any discussions?
Not
or read about
from
anything from
the
hospitals?
educational institutions or the healthcare industry.
How can
We've
you-
not been contacted.
Well, how much confidence do you have in the complaints?
I have to believe that the complaints that the people are feeling are real to them.
Yes.
Absolutely. Whether the water has caused all of them or not is hard to quantify. Absolutely. But you've hit on something. If there truly is a mass problem, then the hospitals particularly should have record of that. The clinics should have record of that to show a spike or an increase in either diarrhea, body rashes, eye infections, and those types of things.
Have you heard from the K through 12 system where we have 84,000, well, in the city of Flint we have 8,000 kids going to to public schools here. And we probably altogether have, within the city, using city water, about 10,000 kids. Have you had any
No,
complaints
and
from any of...
maybe Henry, I could explain real quickly too that to give you an idea of how a lot of people don't really understand where their water comes from. For instance, this map we have up here, there's a main feed line that comes from Lake Huron that comes into the city of Flint, where it's treated at the City of Flint water treatment plant and dispersed throughout the city. Off this same line, there's lines that feed the townships that are around the city. City of Burton, Grand Blanc, Monday, Flint Township, Mount Morris Township, Flushing, Vienna, and Genesee Townships. They are on a different water system as far as source water. They're still getting their water from Lake Huron, but I want to relate an incident. I had a phone call last week from a gentleman that lives way down here in Atlas Township, who is not on the Flint system, and he's not on the county system. He's on a private well. But he didn't know that. and he broke out in a body rash. And he thought it was because he was showering in Flint water. Nowhere's near the system. He had his own well, and my assumption is, after I told him that he either went to the doctor to find out what caused his rash, or he figured that it was just a dry time of the year. His skin was drying out because it's winter, like the heaters are running all the time. I don't know. But a lot of people, unfortunately, don't appreciate exactly where their source water is. There are many private wells in Genesee County. There are about 120,000 people in Genesee County that are on Lake Huron water, and there's about 90,000 people in Flint that are on the Flint River water. And each one of those three systems are separate. But I get calls from all three with the same symptoms.
Now, I probably should ask the city of Flint about this problem, and you probably already understand it because you are a professional in the business. But as I understand it, you take a look at the city of Flint, and it has quadrants.
Yes.
There's a northwest zone, and there's a northeast zone, and a southwest zone, and a southeast zone. Now, and each of these zones are independent,
Yes.
conveyance system of its own.
Yes.
And if a person has a rash here, or diarrhea, or sick, or dies from whatever, from water, and it could be groomed to the water, the likelihood of that water getting back flowing into another system over here is not probable.
Well, it's, in most cases, it's physically impossible because of the backflow
Yeah, they
preventers
got
and the
this big
valve systems
yeah.
that only allow the water to go to a certain direction. Whether it's the northeast quadrant, the northwest quadrant, there's basically a physical separation underground that keeps that water in those different districts.
When a person calls in, now well, even in your system, if you'd like to refer to your own system, but I'm going to use the city of Flint as a means for discussing this. Now, if a person calls in from the southeast zone over here, and he has a problem or she has a problem, and the problem can be verified, and yet another person over here in the northeast, northwest section gets involved, how much does that complicate the remedial action problem that needs to be taken place to
It
resolve the
complicates
problem?
it. Again, I don't have total insight to the Flint system because that's operated by the city, so I can only assume certain things. But it does have an effect. I think when the people see on a newscast or read it in the paper that there's a problem here on the, say, the northeast side, they assume that it's the whole city,
Yeah,
and it's not. It's localized to a
Yeah.
specific area. Now, the problem might get solved up here, and then next week you got another one over here, but they're
that's
unrelated.
different. That's different. But does it, when you get this confusion of everybody complaining and not having real justifiable reason to criticize the water problem, it does interfere with the resolution of the problem, doesn't it?
Well, yes. You have to understand that Flint has limited resources. And if you're spending your time and your money to chase down issues that aren't really happening in one area but are happening in another, you don't have the resources to cover the whole city. So that's part of the problem with the Flint system currently. A lot of their best management practices, techniques that they have done historically, for different reasons, they don't do any longer. And I think that the city hiring an independent professional water engineer or company to look at how they fix water lines, how they replace water lines, how they repair water line breaks is very important, because I believe that they can reduce a lot of their problems by just implementing best management practices when it comes to water line repairs. And what I was saying about this, Henry, and to the audience, is this discolored water that is affecting a lot of people. They see that. They think there's a problem. Well, that discolored water does not come from the water treatment plant. The water that comes from that water treatment plant is as clear as this. It's how they repair and replace water lines that is causing the discolored water. So there's techniques that they can change or improve that will eliminate or reduce that discolored water, which is not a health hazard, as you well know. It's the other things that came from the plant that had to be noticed in August. But the way that they repair and replace water lines is causing a lot of the problems for the people. There are visual problems. They would affect me if it came out of my tap. And there's many things that they can do to reduce or eliminate that problem totally. And that's why I think, and I hope, that this independent consultant or professional will point these things out and Flint can start changing how they do these things.
Yeah, I think it's great to have this new company that they hired that will speak with one voice and get rid of all of the other parameters.
Well, I think it also brings somebody in that doesn't have a dog in the fight, so to speak.
Yeah.
They're there to do one thing, tell the facts the way they are. There's no politics involved. There's no employment moving up the ladder involved. It's a professional firm that will just be there to say, hey, you're doing this right. You need to change this a little bit or alter this so that they're doing things the way that they should be. If I may, Henry, the county has water line breaks too. My system on the outside of the county, we have water line breaks too, but we don't have those kinds of problems.
Mm-hmm. Well, what should be taken care of? The people in the city of Flint want some resolutions. Now they're dealing with the cost of water and they're dealing with the quality of water. Which one do you think is the most achievable immediately?
Well, I believe that both of them have to be addressed because although Flint doesn't have the most expensive water in the state, it's really close to the top. So
you mean in quality?
Cost.
Cost.
Flint's water is not the most expensive in the state, even though some think that it is, and it is high. It is towards the top. But cost and perception or aesthetics is what Flint needs to work on. Because right now it's healthy, safe water. The testing by EPA standards have came back fine since August. So now you got a color issue, a taste issue,
and a perception issue.
And that's the part that they have to work on. And that's going to take time. They have to reach out to the people more to tell them what to expect when you repair a water line. Just don't go repair that water line and then somebody has discolored water and they wonder why. Go tell the people before you do it.
Yeah, and that's what EPA requires for you. If you have an incident, you need to report it right away. And that helps the people. It improves the knowledge of the people of the system. That's what EPA requires. People should not take that as a negative. They should take it as alert system. But if the city or its purveyor is floundering a little bit, then that's the time to get community
Well,
action.
unfortunately, when you're having financial troubles, water and sewer systems are some of the first that get cut as far as person power and techniques, And there's so much that we could talk about Flint's water, the county water, and the KWA system, which is going to help both communities.
Would you touch upon that real quickly?
Well,
because
I don't know how much time we have, but I would like to say that we need
2 or
to
3
do this
minutes.
again.
Yeah, but we need to
Absolutely.
talk about this. Please let people know that there's hope in the...
Well, there's hope with the system you have.
Yeah.
The system is a healthy system. It needs some improvement, no doubt about it. But when the KWA gets here, which is estimated to be June of next year, you're going to have a very clean source of water in Lake Huron.
But then you still got to run it through the treatment plant.
You still run through the treatment plant, but you don't have to use the levels of chlorine in it because it doesn't have the suspended dirt and solids in it.
And
so you can reduce
chemicals.
your chemical loads. You reduce all your loads. You won't have the stronger smell of chlorine because the water doesn't need as much to clean up in the first place.
You only need 4 parts per million to That's what they add.
And then there's contact time,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah,
kind of been
contact
another
time,
problem
sure.
with the Flint plant, is it's not designed to have long contact time. And that's one of the things they're gonna have to address if they continue to use the Flint River as a source.
So you think? Do you think people can look for some kind of relief within the next?
I can't,
half
unfortunately,
year?
I'm not an elected representative of the Flint water sewer system. I think that the leaders of Flint and the emergency manager, i.e. the governor, who did give the city $2 million to help address the issues, they've been woken up to the fact there's a problem and it needs to be addressed, so hoping that time frame gets shortened.
Well, if you could just kind of leave people with some kind of idea of how they can prevent the discharge of heavy metals, solvents into their sewer system, and other types of bacteria into their sewer system that goes to the waste treatment plant and discharged back into the river. The only people
We all drink the same
by
water when it comes to
people
that.
downstream, like at Flushing and so on and so
The
forth.
next thing that we're gonna have to face, believe it or not, are pharmaceuticals. We take so many pharmaceuticals in this country and pass through our system that we're actually starting to pick up pharmaceuticals, whether they be antibiotics or other products in the water system.
Sure.
Very hard to get out of the water system. So don't flush your unused pills down the toilet, because that adds to the problem.
Okay.
Don't put your oil from your car into the system.
Okay, Jeff, we gotta
Properly
cut it off right
dispose it.
there. We gotta go.
But we could do a whole show just
Okay.
on how to treat the water.
Well, today, folks, really, the purpose of this show today was to clarify and give you information regarding the best information that we have on the condition of city water and how it's distributed throughout the city. Jeff, thank you so
My
much for
pleasure.
coming. I hope that we can do this again. You've
My
been
pleasure.
very
Love it.
informative, and I believe that the people, next time we have you on the show, we'll be able
Get
to
some
have
questions
you.
from the people.
Yeah, get
maybe.
some questions from people. At this time, I must say this is Henry Hatter of the In My Opinion show, and we're signing out, and stay focused.